Thank you for watching this presentation on why AI needs guardrails when analyzing safety data. As of late spring 2026, the current state of AI allows it to do many things, from reading Excel files, finding trends in data, making beautiful charts and graphics, writing persuasive narratives, generating Word documents, as well as statistical analysis. The default behavior of these systems is to find trends in data. Ask the model to find a trend or a pattern, it will find a trend and pattern. Given the current state of AI is rapidly changing, hopefully this will improve. But this is unlikely to change since these systems try to please the average user who want to see them finding information in their data set, regardless of whether it's statistically significant. Now, we're going to walk through some examples with random processing times between events following a Poisson arrival process with an average of 4 days between events. A random assignment of a severity and event type based on the distribution in industry data. By construction, this data has no real trends, no real patterns or seasonality. And Claude is used in this presentation, but other tools will do the same thing. Now, what happens when there are no patterns? Many patterns will be found. Tests reveal the following types of patterns are commonly found: day of the week effect, period spikes within the date range, season, quarter, events by shift. Typically, 10 or more findings are presented based on a noisy data set that's fed to the model that has no pattern. Let's explore one of these analyses briefly. If I give the system the random data and the following prompt, the following are maritime injuries, please find trends in the data set. The data set has date, severity, and incident type. Please make a visualization of the trends to include with the text descriptions. And so what it found is that January, April, and December are peak months. September is the quietest. The January-December spike is likely due to cold weather and holiday staffing and fatigue. April is less bumpy, is less obvious, and may warrant operational investigation. Spring maintenance, new hires, weather transitions. Summer months are consistently lower. And so it took the data and found a small difference and then made a story highlighting the winter effects that it may see in the literature that are commonly associated with increased risk. Continuing, when it added things like one encouraging signal is restricted work accidents are declining. Meanwhile, the first aid ticked up and have stayed high in the 30 to 40 range, which may indicate improved reporting of minor events. And we know that the data was random, so this is not a clear trend that's supported in the data from a statistical standpoint. Falls are the fast, and then once it started reading the text in it, it said falls are the fastest rising concern. Falls doubled in that period, only easing in 2025. More importantly, falls produce serious outcomes, and it continues that slips, trips are tending down, suggesting housekeeping or working surface controls are working. And then finally, strains, sprains hold steady. And so whatever small differences are in the data set, it will write a story about that that's very persuasive. And this occurred across all systems. We've conducted fairly significant tests with over 100 data sets, and they're all producing false features in randomly constructed data. Many patterns from random data, dates, and free text are especially vulnerable to this. And the reason why is a date can be broken up into month, day, hour, as well as spikes inside the period. So it could look for groupings of dates. So for January through February January through March of 2024, there was a spike. And free text can include anything, and so it can latch on to information in the free text as well. The reason why this occurs is that AI defines a pattern as similar to the way an average human would define a pattern, by a 20% difference. When you randomly assign items to categories, the difference between the largest category and smallest category is surprisingly large. And this grows as the number of categories grows. So day of the week has 7 categories. Season or month of the year has 12. Hour of the day could have up to 24 categories. And so for day of the week, the range between the minimum and maximum day of the week is expected to be about 20% when you have 1,500 observations, which is circled on the chart there. And that 20% is always going to trigger some sort of story from the AI. And for day of the week, there are great stories. If it's Monday, it's a Monday effect. If it's Friday, it's a Friday effect. If it's Saturday that happens to be high, it's an overtime effect. So it can always generate a narrative based on the pattern, and the 20% difference, if you have less than 1,500 observations, you're expecting to find that. When you start slicing data multiple ways, you get a lot of different, very large numbered categories that require a lot of data. And so unless if you have, thousands and thousands of observations, this problem is going to occur. And most safety data sets tend to be small, thankfully, due to injuries being hopefully infrequent. And by large, I would mean 10, 20,000 observations, you will still run into this problem once you start cutting up the data into smaller and smaller sizes. Can I just require statistical significance with protections for false detections? And yes, statistical significance does help, and Claude can do it. You can even take it one step further and adjust the statistical significance for the number of comparisons. As you compare more and more items, the chance of having false positives increases, so you have to adjust the confidence limits. Now, testing for significance and adjusting for 26 tests performed by the analysis can be done. And once you do that, when you adjust for statistical significance, only 2 claims are left. Slips and trips are decreasing, and April runs hot compared to other months. When you adjust for the number of tests performed, there's no statistically significant evidence of any trends or patterns in this data set. The annual incident rate is consistent with a Poisson arrival at about 100 per year. Year to year and month to month variations are within the bounds of the natural Poisson noise. Okay? And then it highlights the slips, trips in April as being plausible candidates, but not established trends. When you require statistical significance, you actually make the situation worse. Preventing false detection of false trends is good, but it will not alert fast to key metrics such as an increase in injury rate or lost work time events. Statistical significance requires a lot of data, especially with multiple comparisons, especially when you have a Poisson distribution for arrival. So at a baseline of 3 incidents per month, detecting 25% rate increase using standard statistical significance requires about 90 months. And at baseline rates of 10 per month, you'd still need 28 months. So if it's years to detect a 25% increase, and that's a real problem. And multiple comparison correction would even make that worse. So there are some things in your data that you want to know about before statistical significance, such as an increase in the arrival rate of injuries. And there are other things, such as which day of the week has the most injuries, that you probably want statistical significance for. One way to correct this problem is to require statistical significance with corrections for false discoveries for most findings, such as day of the week and seasonal impact. For critical items such as injury rate increases recently, take a quality control approach to detect potential trends quickly. A QSUM control chart works well for this task, though other control charts are equally as effective. We have produced a guide on how to do this simple approach that is available. One way or another, industry needs to agree on best practices when using AI to analyze safety data. We did the same analysis with a 25% increase in the last 2 months. AI alone resulted in lots of trends, including the increase, but found the increase was the 6th finding on the list and was not a strong statement about the increase. Requiring statistical significance results in no increases in the rate. So basically, if you require statistical significance for everything, nothing is found. Statistical significance for adjusting for the number of tests finds nothing. The QSUM for rate increase and statistical significance for everything else finds the increase and makes the increase the most important item when discussing the results. And we can see this in the report. Incidents are happening more often than they used to. The increase is real, not random noise. Now we're averaging 10 per month compared to 7 per month in 2022, a 39% increase in incidents occurring. Okay? And we ran statistical tests that say this is almost no chance of bad luck. And then it discusses how the QSUM chart finds the increases over time and presents graphics of the control chart so you can clearly see the patterns. The reason for using the QSUM as opposed to other control charts is it has period memory, which allows you to detect fairly small changes that sum over time. AI has a certain randomness in the prompts. If you tell it you have a PhD in industrial engineering, it will shift more to statistical analysis, which is still not the correct approach. Past conversations also set the tone of your responses. Without a detailed specification, it is truly unpredictable. Some additional items to consider when using AI always include the number of employees, hours worked, and operating vessels to normalize the work hours, describe the company, make the AI describe the type of analysis in the response. So if you allowed a lot of freedom to pick its analysis, have it tell you what analysis it performed. Describe the type of a report that you want. And note, AI are sycophants. This is the tendency of AI systems to aggressively agree, flatter, validate the users, even when the user is wrong or the information is incorrect. So in conclusion, best practices in the year of AI are critical. You can load a guidance note and get the correct analysis. AI will do any analysis you ask, but will not pick the correct analysis by default. AI will always find patterns in random data. This is a certainty, not a risk. Strict statistical correction prevents false findings, but it also prevents the detection of real rate increases for years. A tiered analysis works. QSUM for injury rates, statistical rigor for everything else is a reasonable approach. Now, for more information, you can contact Dr. Craig or myself at Lamar University, and I want to walk through a few final slides for those of you who have stuck around this far in the presentation, because I think it explains the issue better than I could. So I did the analysis in Claude, and it found a bunch of false trends. I said, do statistical significance. Those trends went away. And then I asked the AI, why does AI have this problem, given that the models know the correct analysis but choose to do a worse approach that makes false discoveries? And it says, good question. It cuts to something real about how the models work, and so it's going to give a layered, honest answer. The first one is the user said find trends, and the model is trained to find trends. And models are trained to be helpful with the user's request, not substitute a different request. So it says, you told me to find trends. I went out and literally did what you asked. The second reason is reinforcement learning from human feedback. Humans during training generally prefer responses that produce findings over responses that say, I cannot detect any patterns in this data set. And so even if there are no patterns in the data set, a human would prefer that you find something even if it's of questionable merit. The model does not know it's looking for injury rate with a Poisson structure unless the context makes it salient, which is not necessarily accurate, because probably that can be inferred just from the simple you're dealing with injury data, but that's the third reason it gave. The fifth reason is interesting. The training data overwhelmingly compares bad analysis. Most data analysis on the internet tends to be simple. Its sales were up 12% in the third quarter type analysis. And so it associates analysis with percentage differences, even if those differences don't rise to the level of statistical significance. A response, and finally, the model optimized apparent quality of immediate responses, not downstream consequences. So a response with 5 patterns is a lot more interesting than a response with 0. And why is this hard to fix at the model level? Anthropic, you might think Anthropic would train the model to apply rigorous statistics by default, but honestly, that's not what users want. They want quick exploratory analysis of their data. Forcing rigor would frustrate the users in a lot of cases. And so the right level of rigor depends on the stakes, which the model does not necessarily know. Statistical significance is also contested. There are many ways of doing it, and as such, it would be difficult for the model to determine what statistical significance measures a particular user would like. What this means for you as a user is that the user has to explicitly invoke rigor or they won't get it. And the models are not going to become correct anytime soon. Even as they get more capable, the default behavior will be continue to give users what they want for their specific request. And this pattern will cause rigor to be ignored unless if it is specifically requested. I hope today's talk has given you some background on how to use models for safety data analysis, and I appreciate you watching. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions.